Today, I'm going to answer the question, does this podcast make you money? I've been asked this question so many times in so many different ways, especially from my dearest, closest friends and many of the audience members in the tribes. The answer for the TLDR version, too long, didn't read, is both, does the podcast make me money? No. And does the podcast make me money? Yes. So let's have a deeper look into that answer. So the podcast both does and doesn't make me money. Now, I think the challenge lies when people ask me that question at face value. Alas, in the last year or so, yes, absolutely, there is money that the podcast makes through AdSense revenue through Google. There is totally an opportunity that is missed at the Inspired Evolution Touchwood at the moment through podcast sponsorships, but we are slowly working on that. One of the big things that I'm conscious of when it comes to sponsorships where people actually pay to advertise on the Inspired Evolution podcast is to make sure that it's completely in alignment. Too many times I've listened to podcasts where I've been an avid follower of the podcast and they started actually speaking about a product in their own voice which had no brand alignment, and it left I hate to say this, a really icky feeling. And trust online is one of those things that's really hard to build and really easy to destroy. And I found myself unaligned to certain podcasters just because of what felt like a bit of a cash grab. So I'm very conscious of the relationship that the podcast affords me with the audience. And if I'm going to promote something and someone's going to sponsor the podcast, it genuinely has to benefit your life. And as a precursor to that, I need to know that it has benefited my life so that I can advocate for it. So hence why sponsorships is a bit of a unturned leaf at the Inspired Evolution at present, but we're also taking our time to get the right sponsors on. So we make some money on AdSense revenue, and at the time of this episode, it's slowly working its way up to the point where it's starting to pay for the amount of editing that goes into all of these videos that you're watching. So the editing is currently being paid for by the AdSense revenue, I would say almost, not quite. That's my short-term ambition, is to sort of get it there. But ultimately, I would say those were the two expected places where people ask me the question, does the podcast make you money? And the answer is actually no, because the amount of money that I make through the AdSense revenue, through YouTube and through podcasting and Spotify ads that they place on there for the podcast is actually not even enough to pay for the editing. And potentially, given sponsorships in due time, maybe that will change the podcast in and of itself now that it's got a larger platform. Thanks to all of you, touchwood, hitting subscribe. Like I said, it really helps. Now, one of the big things to recognize is the podcast actually makes me so many more things than money. And I know this is going to sound really cheesy, but I have to say I've recently been noticing, having podcasts for 6.5 years, that actually it keeps my mind really sharp, touch wood. But especially as you're starting to get older, I think, there is now enough science to sort of say that you've actually got to work on your neuroplasticity a lot harder after the age of 25 to really change, mold, shape your brain. And now with 2 podcasts coming out every week, I'm interviewing and researching 2 guests every week, right? And that's a lot of research, researching, learning about a whole new topic, and then coming into a conversation and having a dynamic conversation with an individual about that. It's just really good mental dojo stuff for my mind. So there is that, the mental acuity side of things. Also, that sort of bleeds into another social takeaway for me, which is actually I've been finding, especially as we start to get older, people start to pigeonhole into their areas of expertise. People either love this or they love that, or they love a little bit of this and they love a little bit of that, but they usually stick to the camps that they know. Now, the nature of the Inspired Evolution podcast being quite diverse is quite profound because we're talking to quantum physicists, quantum biologists, we're talking to Fortune 500 CEOs, we're talking to venture philanthropists, venture investors, we're talking to you listen to the channel. So all different types of people, shamans, healers, hypnotherapists, mindset coaches. Man, this week's episode, I think, is a sex therapist. Like all different kinds of people come on the podcast. And I guess what I've noticed is it's been able to cultivate many different fields of interest, which is then when I go to speak to different people from different walks of life, I'm able to engage and meet people from different areas of life and actually have really interesting conversations with them. So touch wood, I find it's kept me broad in my interests and given me an avenue to explore a broad range of interests, which has kept me interested in many things. So this has been a cool side effect, I think, of 6.5 years of podcasting through the Inspired Evolution. Then there's also the other obvious benefit, which, is really hard to really quantify in value dollar terms, but my mentors, the people that I look up to, the people that I've, read their books long before the podcast started, they've ended up on the podcast and they've become friends. Many of them are currently, even more intimately my mentors than they were before the podcast started. I'm now able to reach out to people and ask questions, which, I find that quite surreal. These are people that I've always looked up to, and maybe I'm pedestaling them too hard, but pardon humble old. It's, I'm enamored by so many people's work. I guess my network has grown, and one of my favorite quotes, I think it's Tim Ferriss, I might be wrong, he probably got it from somebody else and I'm just attributing it to Tim Ferriss. Your network is your net worth. I'm not sure if that's meant to mean that because you've got a large network you make mad bank, but for me, connection being my highest value, I do really feel like, just at its face value, that network is net worth. It has been incredibly enriching meeting so many incredible individuals and being able to call so many of them my friends now. It really is quite humbling. I just don't know how else to articulate it. So that's a little bit about the real value that I get. And now, is that my answer to the yes, this is how the podcast is making me money? No, right? That's not really what I mean when, there's all these etherical, intangible benefits, more qualitative than quantitative benefits to the podcast. Now, really the guts of me answering this question for you today is, does the podcast make me money? I think it really comes down to, how does the podcast make me money? Now, full caveat, when I first started this podcasting journey, I didn't really know that a podcast is what in marketing circles is called content marketing. In fact, I didn't even really understand what marketing was. And potentially some of you tuning into this podcast asking this question of me, I've noticed many people that ask me this question, when you're asking, does the podcast make you money? Many of you don't realize that the podcast is content marketing, and we can talk a lot more about what content marketing is, right? It's a slow form of marketing where I release content to you every week and to the marketplace, and it's my form of marketing with you. Just focusing on the word marketing for a second there. People spend money on marketing. Businesses generally spend money on marketing to market their products, goods and services so that they can make sales, right? So the second bubble is sales, the first bubble being marketing, the third bubble is for their products, services, whatever it is that they deliver, right? So when it comes to, does the podcast make you money? The podcast is actually meant to cost money because it is this thing which is fundamentally my marketing. So foolishly, I think what a lot of people do, and why I think this video is going to be valuable, is when you start your podcast, a lot of you think it's going to be a lucrative venture. It absolutely can be, and yes, it is for me. touch wood, because my product or my service is my coaching. I do one-on-one coaching. I've coached over 260 people now through deep, intimate one-on-one journeys. It's been an incredible gift, touch wood, to be able to facilitate so many people on their life's path, fundamentally around purpose, leadership, career, a life well lived, mindful living, these sort of concepts. At the heart of it, it's purpose coaching, living your fullest, truest expression. But that's my service, right? So people buy the service, and people find out about Amrit through his marketing. They find out about me through the podcast. Absolutely, the podcast makes me money in that regard, even though it's a sunk cost because it's costing me money to go to market, put these videos out in the world. But me sharing these videos with you, having shared them with you for 6.5 years now, has yielded to a coaching database of clients, of existing clients, and also, coming to you, meeting potentially new clients that are interested in being coached. Some of you potentially want to get coaching from me to set up your own podcast. And I've coached that many people that I actually set up a course. This is a sneaky little nudge. I'll just put the podcasting course for those that want to launch their own podcast into the show notes below. So you can absolutely launch your own podcast. And, I coached so many people into that space as well that I just, formalized it into a course and a program because I didn't think it was the highest utility of me sitting there with you one-on-one, helping you set up your podcast when you can zip yourself through it in a course. So again, now that course is a product/service that I deliver, and that course will make me money, right? And my one-on-one coaching will make me money. But my podcast will cost me money. And it's the cost of coming to market. It's the cost of sharing myself with the world. Touch wood. Now, are there forms of marketing that are more lucratively beneficial, if I can put it that way? Probably more optimized. Yeah, there's definitely ways of marketing that are better than content marketing, I imagine. Running ads is pretty straightforward because you can actually target your audience. And that's why you see Instagram ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads targeting you. I'm sure there was either a Mindvalley or a Tony Robbins ad on this video as you were watching it, right? Because they know that you are into spiritual development. And if you're loving this kind of content, you're probably going to love the kind of products and services that they're selling. So absolutely, ads are targeted and they don't cost as much as it takes to produce these kinds of episodes. But the key thing that I would say is, even though those ads are more optimized, there's something to be said for the type of relationship that I get to build with you guys through these podcast episodes, through these videos that I'm creating. We get to know each other really, really well. There's some real intangible benefits that, if you stick with it long enough, become hyper tangible with podcasting. Is it the best type of marketing? Verdict's probably out. I don't know any different, so I love it, and I'm Captain Commitment to it. I love this podcast, Touchwood, and I love all the benefits that come from it, especially the quantitative ones. Everything I discuss, the network growing, the people that I get to meet, the deep relationships and conversations I get to have with the guests, the deep relationship and conversations I get to have with you guys, when the audience, when we finally drop into the community calls, when we finally drop into the coaching calls. I wouldn't want to live Touchwood life any other way. So for me, there are a lot of intangible benefits which are hyper tangible, but financially, is it lucrative? At the moment, the coaching, yes, makes money. So for me, there is a benefit, but I will admit that it took a long time to actually get here. I would say for the first 3 odd years, there was little to see. I was actually spending a lot more money on the podcast than it was making me. And I would say, actually, even now, I'm kind of grateful that finally the AdSense revenue is starting to get close to a point where I can see an end in sight where the AdSense revenue will cover the cost of the episode's productions. That also doesn't cover the cost for all the other people in my team, yeah? So the coaching will still continue to be a big part of how I make my money. It is quite a sunk cost that I've faced to get the podcast to where it is, to a point where potentially it can start paying itself off. That didn't happen overnight success, right? That didn't really happen. But ultimately, hopefully, this has answered some of your questions around, does the podcast make me money? The key thing to take away is that a podcast is your marketing. And then there's a whole nother area in your business called sales. And there's a whole nother area in your business called the product, service, and the delivery, right? So asking, does a podcast make you money, is somewhat oxymoronic, right? Not calling you a moron, pardon me for doing that. I did that a lot for myself. I was trying to figure out how to monetize this thing to the point where I realized the podcast is not actually meant to make me money. Again, going back, maybe sponsorships will, but right, it's not meant to make me money. It's meant to be a pathway for me to conduct a sale for a product, service, or delivery. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense and answers the question for you. Does this podcast make me money? Absolutely yes, but also totally no. All right, guys, this was a bit of a different video from me talking about my podcasting journey. It's a bit more of a community call, me not trying to teach you something from coaching, but I guess teaching you a little bit about what I've learned about podcasting, marketing, coaching, and business. So yeah, if you're loving these kind of videos, please let me know in the comments below. As you know, these videos, this format is new, and I'm enjoying creating these videos for you, and I'm exploring what videos work best. So every time you leave a comment, it lets me know that you enjoy this content, and if you are enjoying it, let me know what you're enjoying about it. It's just so I get a bit of a gauge on the type of content you want to create. And if you want to see more videos like this, if you've got more curiosities about the back end of the podcast and stuff like that, let me know what your questions are. I love creating these videos. So yeah, please hit those questions down below and I will create a video hopefully tailored to your question. Thank you so much for doing so. And as always, if you are getting value from these podcasts, I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you could, please hit subscribe. And as always, be inspired. Keep evolving. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through to its end. Obviously, these insights are inspiring your evolution, and that means the world to me. Right here is the very next best video for you to watch that will keep your inspiration flowing, keep you evolving, and keep you guessed it, yowing! Check it out now.